Hello. So today we will see the introduction about the digital forensics and investigation. In today's session, we will focus on what is digital forensic, what is digital investigation, what is digital evidence, and the importance of the digital forensics and investigation in our daily life scenarios, and what are the different phases of the digital investigation and forensics. So let's begin with what is digital forensics. So as you know that computer forensics, nowadays known as digital forensic, has been a professional field for many years. And of course, with the growth of the internet and the worldwide demands for the computers have increased the need for these digital investigations and digital forensics. This is because these computers can be used to commit crimes, and also crimes can also be recorded on these computers. So these crimes actually includes company policy violations, email harassments, and even terrorism. So the law enforcement agencies, network administrators, and even the private sector investigators now rely on the skills of the digital forensic experts to investigate criminal and civil cases. Digital forensics involves the scientifically examining and analyzing the data from the computer storage so that it can be used as an evidence in the court, in the criminal, or in the civil proceedings. Normally, digital investigation starts after an incident is occurred. So it tries to answer questions like what happened, who did it, and why it was done, where did it happen, and how it was executed by carefully examining all the actions performed on digital device. So it mainly involves the identification, collection, examinations, and analysis of the data while preserving the integrity of the information and maintaining a chain of custody. Digital forensic is also different from the data recovery, which involves retrieving of information that was deleted or lost during power failure or crash or sometimes by mistake. So in data recovery, typically we know that what we are looking for. But in digital forensics, the process is something different because in the digital forensic, we are trying to recover the hidden or deleted data so that it can be used as an evidence if it is valid. Now, the digital investigation functions can be seen as a part of the triangle that makes up the whole computing security. And it includes vulnerability, threat assessment, and risk management. It also includes the network intrusion detection and incident response, and also the digital investigation. So each side of this triangle represents a group or a department which is responsible performing associated tasks. So although each of these groups operate independently, but all three groups can share information with one another whenever there is a very large scale investigation is being conducted. So by combining these three groups into a team, we can say that all aspects of the digital technology investigations can be addressed without the need of any third party or outsider services. But in smaller companies, one group might perform all these tasks, or a small company can contract with the service providers to do and perform investigations for them. So, digital investigation can also be categorized in public sector investigations and private sector investigations. Public sector investigations involves government agencies who are responsible for criminal investigations and prosecutions. So government agencies range from municipal, county, or state and provincial police department to federal law enforcement agencies. On the other hand, private sector investigations focus mainly on the policy violations. However, criminal acts such as corporate spying can also occur. So private sector investigations often start as a civil case, but it can develop into criminal cases. Okay, so if you follow a good forensic procedure, the evidence found in your examinations can make a transition between the civil and criminal cases. Criminal investigations generally begins with if someone finds an evidence or witness an illegal act. So the witness or a victim goes to a police and makes an allegation that a crime has been committed. So when investigator officer in the crime scene unit retrieves blood samples or hair or bullets, they can identify what it is. But whenever mobile phone or laptop or any digital device is retrieved, its contents are unknown, and it is a challenge for the examiner to know or find its content. So examiner often approach a digital device not knowing whether it contains an evidence or not. So they must search all the storage devices. So forensic software tools can be used in most cases, but sometimes in extreme cases, examiner can use electronic microscope or other sophisticated equipments to retrieve information from those storage devices that was damaged or reformatted intentionally. But this method is usually very expensive and it is not normally used. Okay, what is digital evidence? So, a general definition is any data stored or transmitted using a computer that addresses the critical element of the offense is considered as an evidence. So, the data is essentially a combination of numbers and represents the information of various kinds, for example, text, images, audios, and videos. Okay, so digital evidence can be anything, we can say, that can address the critical elements of the offense, and it must be in a human readable format because evidence is used to establish facts about the case. When considering many sources of the digital evidence, it is also useful to categorize computer systems into three groups. So, open computer systems are what most people think of as a computer system that consists of a hard drives, keyboard, and monitor, such as our laptops and desktops. So, these systems, with their large amount of storage spaces, can be a rich source of digital evidence. So, a simple file can contain important information, and that file can have associated properties that might be useful in the investigation. Similarly, communication systems. So, traditional telephone systems or wireless communication systems and the internet and the networks that can be a source of digital evidence because telecommunication system transfers SMS and MMS messages and the internet carries email messages around the world. So the time of the message, the time when the message was created, or who likely sent it, or what the message contained can all be important in the investigations. So to verify when the message was sent, it may be necessary to examine the log files from any intermediate routers or servers. We also have the embedded computer systems. So mobile devices, smart cards, and any other type of systems with the embedded computers may contain digital evidence. So mobile devices, can contain communication, digital photographs, videos, and other personal data. So also, the navigation systems can be used to determine where the vehicle has been. So sensing and diagnostic modules in the vehicle also holds some useful information to understand the accident event. Even nowadays, microwaves are now available with the embedded computers that can download information from the internet and also allows users to program them remotely via wireless networks or via the internet. So these devices can be used as a digital evidence as they are now holding some useful and relevant information. Nowadays, many crimes involve the computers or smartphones or any sort of digital device. For example, drug dealers or other criminals, they often keep information about their transactions on their personal computers, laptops, smartphones, and some other digital devices. Other crimes, including missing children and adults, because information about those missing people is also found on the computers. So the most dangerous crimes are those which involves the exploitation of minors. So digital images are stored on a hard disk, flash drives, sometimes removable drives, and even on the clouds, and then they circulate over the internet. In some cases, Computer provides a mean of committing crime. For example, the internet can be used to deliver a death threat via email, or internet can be used to launch a hacking attack against some vulnerable computers or networks. But in other cases, in other scenarios, computers serve as a convenient storage device for the evidence of crime. So we can say that virtually every class of crimes nowadays can involve some form of the digital evidence. Now, who actually needs or uses this digital forensics? So the digital forensics can be applied to a variety of different situations. Law enforcement agencies sometimes needs computer forensics to investigate a crime. The computer system itself may act as a scene of crime in case of denial of service attacks or hacking. Computers holds evidence of crime usually, and a lot of people may also store information on a computer unintentionally. So the evidence that computer forensic investigation produces might be in the form of emails, documents, or even in the form of internet history. In addition to the information on computers, a law enforcement officer may use files metadata to find more about the particular crime. So a computer forensic analyst will determine when the file was first created, when it was edited, and when it was printed or last saved. So the forensic examination can also determine which user actually carried out all these activities. Computer forensic is also used when corporate information is disclosed without permissions. That could be accidentally or by in with some malicious intentions. So computer forensic can be used when employee steals some intellectual property from their employer and passes it to the competitors or use it to set up a competing company. When employer violates a computer policy such as when and how to use the internet, again there is a role of computer forensics because some organizations have rules on how the computer or the internet should be used. So if the system in the office is used for any illegal activity, computer forensic can help us in determining when and how these illegal activities was conducted. So computer forensics is used in general criminal and civil proceedings as well. This is because criminals sometimes store information on a computer, as we discussed in the previous slides. So who are the victims? So the victims can be anyone. It can be a private business, it can be a government organization, and it can be a private individual. So anyone can be a victim of cyber threat and cyber crime. So there are four basic phases in the digital forensics and investigation. First is the identification phase. So the identification process mainly includes things like what the evidence is, where it is stored, and how it is stored, and in which format it is stored. Then we have the preservation phase, and in this phase, data is isolated, secured, and preserved. It includes preventing people from using the digital device so that the digital evidence is protected from tampering or from any sort of damage. Then we also have the analysis phase, and in this step, investigation agents reconstruct the fragments of all data and draws conclusion based on the evidence found from those devices. Then we have the documentation and presentation phase. So in this phase, a record of all visible data is created, and it helps in recreating the crime scene and reviewing it. It involves proper documentation of the crime scenes, along with the photographs, sketching, and the crime scenes mapping, etc. So let's go into the detail of each phase. So the aim of the identification phase is to locate likely sources of digital evidence and then seize them. In some cases, such as the intrusion investigation, It may be necessary to extract information from RAM as well. So a computer investigator looks for hardware. So in addition to desktop computers, also looks for the laptop, external drives, digital cameras, and any other equipment that can store digital evidence. If a hardware is being collected for future examination, also try to collect peripheral hardwares that is attached to that computer or that device. For example, printer, cameras, scanners that can also be linked to the documents and digitized images. Computer investigator also looks for the software. So if a digital evidence was created using a program that is not widely used, so it is better to collect the installation disks because it will make it easier for the examiner to examine the evidence uh, in a later stage. Investigator also looks for the removable medias because there are a wide variety of removable medias out there in the market that can contain digital evidence, including floppy disk, compact disk, and magnetic tapes. So also looks for the backup either on-site and in the remote storage facilities and determine that what hardware and software was used to make those backups. Because in some cases, backups can only be accessed using the type of hardware and software that actually created them. Therefore, considering those and collecting the unusual backup hardware and software as well from the crime scene. It is not necessary to collect those hardware and software which is freely available and commonly available. So keep in mind that criminals often hide removable medias that contain some important information. Investigator also looks for the documentation that is related to the hardware, software, and any removable media. Because documentation can help investigator to understand the details about the hardware, software, and also about the backup process. And these are useful during the investigation and the trial procedure time. Investigator also looks for the passwords and important telephone numbers on or near to the computers. They also look through the garbage for any printouts or any other evidence related to the investigations because computer printouts can contain sometimes valuable informations and can sometimes be compared with the digital copies of the information for any discrepancies. Investigator also takes a photograph of the evidence and pay particular attention to the serial numbers and wiring because it will help in identifying and reconstructing those equipments later. Also note and photograph the content of the computer screen. So if a program is running that might be destroying data, so immediately disconnect power to that computer. If applications are open, save their content on a sanitized disk and label them properly before closing them. Shut down the computer if it is necessary, and also before copying data, calculate the MD5 values of all disks and the files they contain. Record those values for any future reference. Sometimes, when the entire computer is required, in that case, label each cable and port. Empty ports should be labeled unused. If there is no label on the port, it could be argued that the evidence was not properly handled and documented. So any doubt that can be shed on the evidence collection and documentation process can weaken the case. So put an unused disk in each floppy drive to protect the drive itself. Use evidence tape to seal the computer case and drives to protect them from any sort of tampering. Carefully pack all the hardwares and do not expose them to any potential damaging conditions. For example, fluid, humidity, or cold or static electricity, etc. So whenever an investigator visits the crime scene, it identifies the computer system, secures the scenes, and preserve the trace of any evidence. It also looks for the computer if is it on or is it off. So if it is off, so that the investigator takes a photograph, labels them, and document each and everything of the crime scene, and also disconnect the system from the power supply and look for any peripheral passwords and removable media near to the computer. But if the computer is on, it checks for the screensaver. That is there any screensaver on this computer or not? If there is no screensaver, so the investigator immediately look for the for any program which is actually running on the system to destroy the evidence. But if there is a screensaver, so the investigator moves the mouse to see that is it asking for the password. If it is not asking for the password, again it looks for the program destroying the evidence. But if it asks for the password, so the investigator immediately disconnects the system from the power supply. Also, if a program is running on the system which is destroying the evidence, again the investigator immediately disconnect the system from the power supply. But if there is no such program running on the system which is destroying the evidence, then investigator document the screen, system times, network activities, and also, if possible, take the image of the RAM in order to know its content. Sometimes the he will check, the investigator will check that is there a need to take the whole entire computer or not. So if there is no need or to take the entire computer, in that case, the investigator will collect only those digital evidences which are needed. But if the investigator feels that there is a need to take the whole entire computer, in that case again, the investigator will disconnect the computer from power supply and properly take a photo, label them, and document each and every steps of the computers and disconnect them and also collect any peripherals or the hardware and USBs which are attached to that computer. Preservation is the second phase of the digital investigation. So when dealing with the digital evidence, the focus is on the content of the computer and the storage media, not on the hard drive itself. So the approach that the digital investigator takes, it depends on the specifics of the case and the items of the evidence. In some cases, there may not be an immediate need to extract the digital evidence from a given computer or a given storage device, in which case the original evidence can be placed in a secure storage or in a secure place for future processing. But in other cases, when the computer contains important digital evidence, but the majority of the data on that device are not relevant, or the data is too large to acquire within the available time and resources, then it may be most effective to acquire the items of interest only. But if there is an abundance of digital evidence on a computer or on that storage device, so it often makes sense to copy the entire content and examine it carefully in a free time. Even after copying data from the computers, digital investigators generally retain the original evidence item in a secure locations for any future reference. In this way, the original item is always available for additional processing in future if there is a need. When acquiring all the data or just a subset of the data, there are two laws of digital evidence collection that should always be remembered. First is, if you only make one copy of the digital evidence, that can be damaged and that can be lost. Second, a forensic acquisition should contain at least the data that is accessible to a regular user on another computer. So these two laws must be remembered. Therefore, investigator always makes at least two copies of the digital evidence and make sure that at least one of the copies was successfully accessed on another computer. It is also a common practice to calculate MD5 values of the original evidence media before acquiring the bitstream copy. So the chain of custody refers to the logical sequence that records the sequence of the custody, control, transfer, analysis in any legal cases. So each step in the chain is important. If it is broken, the evidence may be considered as invalid. So we can say that Preserving the chain of custody is about following the correct and consistent procedure and ensuring the quality of the evidence. So we can say that the chain of custody indicates the collection, sequence of control, transfer, and analysis. It also documents the details of each person who handled the evidence, date and time it was collected, transferred, and the purpose of the transfer. And it shows to the court and to the clients that the evidence has not been tampered. So the chain of custody tries to answer the chain of custody form actually tries to answer the questions like what is the evidence, how did you get it, when it was collected, who handled it, why did that person handle it, where it was stored, how it was transported, how it was tracked, for example, how it was stored, and who actually accessed that evidence. Analysis is or examination is the third phase of the digital investigation process. So, computer examination is the process of extracting and viewing information from the evidence and making it available for the analysis. So, forensic examination of the digital evidence is generally one of the most resource intensive and time consuming steps in the digital investigation. To produce useful results in a timely manner at different phases of the digital investigation, it is useful to employ at the three level of forensic examination activity. The first level known as the survey forensic inspection. So in this level, all the available medias are examined to determine which item contains the most useful evidence and require additional processing. The second level, known as preliminary forensic examination, it examines items identified during the first level with the intention of quickly providing investigators with the information that which will help them in conducting interviews and developing some leads. The third level, known as the in-depth forensic examination, and it is a comprehensive forensic examination of items that requires more extensive investigation to gain more and complete understanding of the offense and also addresses some specific questions. Preparation of the forensic examination is also important. So before performing the forensic examination of digital evidence, it is advisable to prepare a plan of actions that outlines what steps will be taken and what processes will be performed on each item of the digital evidence. So, without such plan, digital investigators may miss or ignore some of the items. In addition, it may be necessary to prepare a forensic workstation with the required softwares and sanitized storage spaces to conduct any digital forensic examination. Certain items within the source of digital evidence may require special processing so that they can be examined more easily. So those special items can include mailboxes, password protected files, encrypted volumes, and unallocated spaces, for example. So to extract additional details, digital investigators might use specialized examination procedures on those malicious programs on the compromised, for example, server. Once all sources of the digital evidence and specialized items that are required further processing have been identified and examined, the results can be incorporated into the analysis process. So the forensic analysis process is inseparable from the scientific methods. By definition, forensic analysis is the application of the scientific methods and critical thinking to address the fundamental questions in the investigation, like who, what, where, when, and how. So, the analysis of the extracted data is a process in which the extracted data is analyzed to determine its significance to the case. So some of the analysis techniques also suggested by the EC Council includes time frame analysis, data hiding analysis, application and file analysis, and ownership and possession analysis. So the time frame analysis can be useful in determining when event occurred on a computer system, and which can be used as a part of associating usage of the computer to an individual at that specific particular time and event when the incident happened. So two methods can be used. One is reviewing time and date stamps, which is contained in a file system metadata, because it will tell you last modified, last access created, and so on. Second is reviewing the systems and application logs that may be present. So these includes error logs, installation logs, connection logs, and also the security logs. So for example, the examination of security logs may indicate when a username and password combination was used to log into the system. Data hiding analysis can also be used. So the data, as you know, can be hidden on the computer system. So the data hiding analysis can be useful in detecting and recovering such hidden data and may reveal some useful information such as ownership, the data was created, and so on. So various methods can be used to do that. For example, correlating file headers to the corresponding file extension to identify any mismatch. And the presence of the mismatch definitely indicates that the user intentionally hid that data. Another way of Another way is to gain access to all the password protected, encrypted, and compressed files, which may also indicate an attempt to hide the data from unauthorized users. Gaining access to the host protected area is another way of hiding data, finding hidden data. The presence of user data in that host protected area also indicates an attempt to hide the data from unauthorized users. We have application and file analysis. So many programs and files which are identified may contain the information which is relevant to the investigation. And also, those files may provide an insight into the capabilities of the system and the knowledge of the users. So the results of this analysis may suggest additional steps that need to be taken in the extraction and the analysis process. For example, it includes reviewing file names for the relevance and patterns, examining file content, identifying the number and the type of the operating systems. Okay. We have ownership and the possession analysis. So in some instances, it may be essential to identify the individuals who created, modified, or accessed those files. So it may also be important to determine the ownership and the knowledgeable possessions of the questioned data. Elements of the knowledgeable possessions may be based on the analysis, and it may include one or more factors. For example, placing and storing a file on the computer at a particular date and time may also help us in determining the ownership and the possession of the file. Okay. The last stage of the digital investigation and examination is to integrate all findings and conclusions into the final report that conveys the finding to others and that the examiner may have to present in the court. So writing a report is one of the most important stage of the process because it is the only view that others have of the entire process. All findings must be communicated clearly in writing. A well written report that clearly outlines the examiner's findings can convince the opposition to settle out everything out of the court, while a weakly written report can fuel the opposition to proceed to a trial. Assumptions and lack of foundations in evidence results in a weak report. Therefore, it is important to build a solid arguments by providing all supporting evidence and demonstrating that the explanation provided in this report is the most reasonable one. Wherever possible, support all assertions with the multiple independent sources of the evidence and include all the relevant evidence along with the report. Clearly states that how and where all evidence were found, to help the decision maker to interpret the report and to enable other competent examiners to verify the results present in the report. So this brings us to the end of this session. And so in today's session, we have seen what is digital investigation, the process involved in the digital investigations, and the methods that can be adopted by the digital investigator in any criminal or the civil proceedings. So the investigation, we saw that it can be divided into four steps: identification, preservation, analysis, and presentations. And the report is considered as one of the main part of the investigation, and it must be unbiased and based on the actual facts. Opinion must be based on the facts, and the report must be appropriate to the target audience. Okay, thank you for your attention.